Hey guys, what's up? How you doing today? So, we are going to be reviewing Breaking Night by Liz Murray. I just got finished with this book, so I wanted to do a quick review on it. I'm going to try to keep this one spoiler free for the most part, because I think I can. I think it's doable given the type of book it was. This is a memoir, a nonfiction memoir about a woman named Liz Murray, and it's really just the entirety of her life from childhood to adulthood and how she goes from a really drug involved family into then her own homelessness, and then eventually she pulls out of all of that and all of her crazy hardships and becomes a student at Harvard. She goes to school at Harvard. So that's like, whoa. It's a really crazy story. It's really moving. It's really awesome and profound. And I think it's a pretty crazy book, and there's a lot to get out of it, a lot of great messages. So I just want to talk a little bit about it more. And I think I can keep it spoiler free just because this is more just about like the plot, the storyline is already known from beginning to end just as you go into the book, but it's more about the way she tells it and what she has to say, and her conveying what she learned from her own experiences and sharing that with us, the reader. So that's what I wanted to get into. I will say this wasn't one of my favorites, and I think it mostly did have to do, like, I don't want to discredit or devalue the story at all, because what she experienced, that, like, my rating of this book is not my rating at all on what she personally experienced. It's more so just about the book, and I would say that I gave it a 3.5 stars, just because I just think I had a little bit of trouble with how the book was written. So I'll talk about some of the things that I really did like about this book first, and then maybe get into some of the other things that I guess like kind of knocked it down a few for me. But I think that this story is really amazing, like I already said, and it really teaches you about, first off, about like how this a very, abusive family in whatever way that may be, or a drug related family, and just your upbringing in general can really affect your future. Like it directly affects your childhood, but as a result, like it can just really pull into your entire future and affect you for the rest of your life. And just seeing how children just fight for the love of their parents. They're always, just naturally, that's what a child is going to do. And it's really hard to see what she experienced trying to do that with drug addicted parents. And so she was kind of fighting against the drugs that they were taking, trying to get love out of them when they had this strong pull. And there was just, it's really interesting to see how she doesn't blame her parents for the drugs that they were addicted to, and still try to appreciate their, like, embrace their love and appreciate them for who they are. And she didn't blame them, she more so like blamed the drugs. And I don't know, to get more into that, I think like that's something you absorb from the book, but I just, reading about that was really fascinating, and she really emphasized that a lot in the first beginning part of the book. So that was really interesting and I think valuable. And then later throughout the book, it just talking about how she is able to overcome her hardships, and just basically taking her life and realizing that, like, she's the one in control, and if there's anybody that's going to fight for herself, it's herself, and she has to take matters into her own hands. And just that process of seeing her learning her lessons from the people that she has that come into her life, and how she uses her relationships or realizes that they're really just not the right fit for her, and like how she can decide who she needs to be around or what's right for her, and what it takes for her to be able to see that was really fascinating. So being able to read that directly from a book, like, it's one thing just to hear stories about, like, oh, that's amazing, she went from homeless to Harvard, like, that's so fascinating, but really to be taken through the story is something else. And I think that that was something that was valuable in this book that I really did appreciate. I did want to say, I guess a few things that weren't my favorite was, like I said, she spoke a lot about her childhood, and then she spoke a lot about her, I guess, the beginning of her homeless years, which was mainly in her teenage time frame. That was like a really large chunk of the book, and there was a lot of detail, like even at some points it was talking about, like, on a day-to-day timeline track, like talking about from one day to the next and how things were changing even in just that time frame. But then fast forward, there were a lot of things that I feel like were rapidly gone through, and a lot of details that were missed later on, or not necessarily missed, but just I felt like could have been more valuable to the reader for them to be emphasized even more. And I think it was a little bit excuse me, confusing at times for the reader. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it was still a great book, and I still really enjoyed it, but, like, for example, on the back of the book, you can see that she goes to Harvard eventually. So you know she gets accepted, you know, but she doesn't actually really emphasize very much like what happens in Harvard. Like she doesn't talk about Harvard very much at all. Like there's a little bit, but that's just something I was like looking forward to. Like you're building up to it, you know it's going to happen, and you just want to hear also a little bit of that experience, but that wasn't received. So maybe she were to write another book. I'm not entirely sure, or if she did, but I'm just saying like that would be something that I think would have been valuable to hear about, because that was something that I was interested in. I'm sure others were as well. Another thing I wish I knew more about was, like, as I said, there were a lot of details throughout the book, but I felt like there was also quite a bit of lack of clarity. So like when she chose to actually go from home, like she was homeless and she basically had to take some extra steps to really like put herself back on track. And so that like is pretty much what I'm talking about. Like what was that turning point where you finally decided, yes, that is like, I am going to like get back on track. I am going to start going to school. I am going to try to find what I need in order to make that happen. And I was watching some reviews after I had finished the book on, and some interviews, I think, as well. And I think that was where I was able to get that. But that was something I think that should have been more clear in the book. And at least from what I heard in the interview, like what she said there wasn't quite what matched in the book. And I don't want to spill exactly what all that was. But I'm just saying that's one example of something that I think could have been more valuable for the reader to see that, to know like, oh, okay, like this is what you learned from your experience. And like you're sharing, like these are the things that really pushed you. But all that aside, I still think there were some really great messages that I was able to take out of the book, like just like I said about what she learned from her parents and that dynamic there, and then finding out that she's the one in control of her own relationships and the way her life goes. Or you can only be in control of what you can be in control of, and you have to recognize what that is and do your best to, you know, take a handle on your life, and she did that to the max. So it was really cool to see her overcome that. And I mean, a story like this, you can't say that it's not impressive. It's a very impressive story, and it was really great to be able to read that. I just think a little bit of the way it read and some of the way the details were shared, it made it hard for me to keep up. I don't know. Like there were just also some characters that were brought in, like kind of what felt like sort of randomly, and then they were like heavily a part of her life. And I was like, wait, how did this person show up here again? I didn't even really understand that. And I don't know, I think that would have been something that would have been more valuable. So yeah, it was a little confusing, I guess you could say. I'm not sure if that's the best word to describe, but I think you get my point. So anyway, it was still a really good story, and I'm not to say that like I know that maybe reading nonfiction memoirs might not be 100% my thing, like rom-com, fun romance, like I think is more my thing. So it's hard because there's definitely another person that would give us a full 5 stars and be like, wow, this is just such an amazing story, 5 stars. And I look deeper into it, like I want to have more of a plot, more of a story that I can follow that. And not that I'm saying that this wasn't a story, but like there were just some holes there that I felt needed to be filled, or some relationships that could have been elaborated on, and some that could have been, you know, skimmed down a little bit or cut down. And just the way it read, I think I had a little bit of trouble with it. But again, like that's not to say this is a bad story, and I think that there are a lot of people that would really enjoy this. So I still like, if the story itself interests you, I would give it a shot, and I would love to hear what you have to say, and ask me any questions too if you have any. I'd be more than happy to talk more about it. But yeah, it was still a good read. I'll definitely give it that. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.